Hi, I'm Crystal, the parenting coach. Parenting is a thing that some of us just expected to know how to do. It's not like other areas of your life where you go to school and get taught, get on-the-job training, or have mentors to help you. But now you can get that help here. I believe that your relationship with your children is one of the most important aspects of your life and the best way that you can make a positive impact on the world and on the future. I've made parental relationships my life study, and I use life coaching tools, emotional wellness tools, and connection-based parenting to build amazing relationships between parents and their children. If you want an even better relationship with your child, this podcast will help you. Take my parenting quiz at the link in the show notes. Once we know what your parenting style is, we will send some tips tailored to you and a roadmap to help you get the most out of my podcast. Welcome to the Parenting Coach Podcast, Season 8. This is Episode 1. Secure Attachment in Parenting and Why It's What the World Needs with Eli Harwood. In this world of breaking old patterns of parenting and parenting in a more conscious, connected, and attachment-based way, you may have noticed that it feels really hard sometimes. Parenting while reparenting yourself can feel like this. In this conversation, we'll dig into the hard, give some ideas and support, and explain a little bit more of the how-tos when it comes to a connection-focused relationship with your kids. Eli Harwood, the attachment nerd, joins us. She is a licensed therapist, author, and educator who has more than 17 years of experience helping people process relational traumas and develop secure attachment relationships with their children and partners. Eli has 3 children, 1 husband, 1 cat, and an extraordinary number of plants. In today's episode, we talk all about why parenting in a different way than we were raised feels so hard to do and how to get through that stuckness, what it means to actually have a secure attachment. We talk about entitlement and boundaries and how you know if your parenting style is actually working, how to show compassion and love without being permissive or passive. And we give you some tools to use today, like setting up a community of support and focusing on your physical needs. We also dig into what a world with securely attached people would actually look like and why it would be so amazing. I can't wait to bring you this amazing podcast interview. And also be sure to check out my amazing new offer called the Creation Room for anyone who wants help celebrating and creating intuitive goals throughout the year.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Parenting Coach Podcast, and welcome to a new season. We're in Season 8, which is just so fun and so awesome. Thank you for being here and for listening to all these amazing interviews. I have just the most amazing interview that you are going to love to kick off Season 8. I am super excited for this. I have been excited for a few months as I've been waiting for her. So I will let her introduce herself. Welcome, Eli, to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Okay. I'm Eli. It's always funny when people ask you to tell about yourself because we're all such complicated people, right? Like, which piece should I share? But the piece that's probably most interesting to your audience is that I'm a therapist, I'm an attachment researcher, I'm an author, and I'm a mom of 3. And I'm on a mission to make as many people aware of what they can do to offer secure connection to their children as possible. Because I believe that at the root of pretty much most of the things that we struggle with as human beings is insecure connection. And so my hope is that people can really get empowered to understand what we know, because we actually know a lot. We have some good data, and to apply that with their littles. And as their littles become mediums and bigs and grownups, that they would have a secure attachment experience with their kids. And me too. Also, it's just a selfish agenda. I'm digging into all of this also for myself and with me and my kids. So I'm not,
I love that so much because it really is like whenever I see any issue in the world, literally anything, I'm always like, oh, it's parenting. Oh, it goes back to their childhood. Like if this was,
it does.
Anyway, so I love what you do. I love all the content you share. If you don't already know, Eli is the attachment nerd on Instagram. And she shares lots of really relevant, important, interesting information in really great ways. So make sure you go check her out there also. But I'm most excited about your new book. I feel like this is just perfect because it just came out recently. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about what your book is about, and then we'll dig into attachment.
Okay. So when you're a therapist and you're working with families and kids, one of the things you really recognize over time is how much a parent's stuff is affecting the dynamic with their children. Now, kids have stuff. Kids have neurodivergence. Kids have, environments that aren't right for them. Kids have dietary stuff even that can affect their behavior. Like there's all sorts of stuff that happens in kids. But what's happening in the parent's response to a child is the most powerful component that can be affected in the process of, intervening with negative behavior or a hard season. And so the average therapist knows this. The average therapist gets a intake for a client or a family, and they know, I have to figure out how to help this parent understand how they can do what they're doing differently. And across all planes, when we have processed our own childhoods, and so this is what this book is going to help you do. When you go back and you make sense of how was I related to, especially in moments when I was tender or distressed, what were the relational responses to me? And how did that form my relationship to my emotions and emotions in general, my beliefs about needs and closeness, my patterns of handling my closest relationships? That is when we are empowered to make changes. And for 50% of us, we learned insecure patterns of relating. And so securely attached is about helping anybody, but specifically those of us who are like, how do we do this? What does it look like when my kid's melting down because I didn't give them what they want? What am I supposed to do? Right? Like that kind of question. My response is first, stop. You have to process your own childhood. You have to process your own experiences first, because as you do that, you will start to get incredible insight into what it is you needed when you were the little munchkin melting down, right? And that energy helps sustain us into being highly warm, responsive, and attuned caregivers who can hold boundaries with compassion, who can respond to tender emotion with empathy and not overwhelm or shut down, right? And so this first book is basically like, okay, parent, I know you want the tips and tricks and tools, and don't worry, they're coming in my second book. But this book is the thing.
First book, that means there's another one coming out.
It's coming out. Raising Securely Attached Kids will be out in the fall. And that one's not a workbook. That one's a bookie book. But I wrote this one first on purpose because this is the work that has to be done. You can buy every parenting book on the planet, but if you have unresolved insecure attachment dynamics from your own childhood, your children will not feel secure with you because you will be relating out of those scarcity places.
Oh, that is such a powerful statement. I think to recognize we can, and that was exactly my story too. I'm like reading all these books and I'm like trying to play it cool and be calm and love them and whatever. And I'm like, this is impossible. And it wasn't until I started working on me that it started just coming naturally and flowing naturally from myself. And so I see that so well, so clearly. Let's first maybe narrow down, what is this parenting like? Like, what does it look like? What do you call it? I know everybody calls them, uses a different name of parenting.
Yeah, like a different term. I mean, I would say, well, okay, for like a shticky term, probably it's connection-focused parenting. So we're prioritizing the connection and the relationship as our primary tool of influence.
Yeah.
But from a scientific perspective, this is cultivating secure attachment with our children. That's what we're doing. And so what does that look like? Well, it is all about our capacity to be in sync. And it doesn't have to be all the time. But if our baby is crying, they need us to mirror and respond, bring them close. Hey, oh no, what's the matter? Did the dog bark? Did that scare you? You got scared, right? We're going to mirror on our face. We're going to be responsive. When our children are dysregulated, so they're upset, their nervous system is highly activated, they're getting flooded with neurochemicals, that we are going to act as a source of steadiness and warmth and co-regulation. So if you're upset, I'm going to be here to help you soothe. I'm going to be here to help you feel your feelings, to learn your feelings, to understand what's happening. I'm not going to give in to all of your requests. Sometimes you're upset because I said no. I'm still going to hold my no because my no is an important thing that I've decided to keep you safe or healthy, etc. But I'm also going to be compassionate with you. I know it's really hard. Those jelly beans were so yummy. You wanted to keep eating them. But because you're only 3, it's still my job to recognize that you need some other nutrition, and too many jelly beans are going to make your bellies hurt and have an owie. And so I'm going to make sure that you don't have an owie. Just like I wouldn't let you step out in the street if a car was coming, because it could give you a big car owie. I always make sure we hold hands. I'm doing that same thing right now. And our kids might go in response to that boundary. Yeah, because they're processing grief, actually. They're having the experience of, I want something. I thought I was going to have something. I'm not having it. And I'm feeling loss. And so we move through that with them. We give them space if they take space for a minute, and then we go back in. That was really hard. Sometimes it's really hard. You
actually had a really perfect reels on this recently, where you were like the fairy and the Christmas tree and everything. I don't know if you're
yeah.
And I loved it because I think it's so difficult for us to see that what we're doing is working. Right? When we're like empathetic and holding that boundary and kind and loving, and then they freak out, which is usually what happens, right?
Yes.
And then they stomp off and you're like, wait, but some lady,
that was supposed to work.
some podcast told me that this was supposed to work. So tell us more about that.
We've got short-term goals and long-term goals as parents. And I've got short-term goals every day, all day long. I've got to get my kids to school. I've got to get them to brush their teeth, right? I've got to get my son to finish his mathematics homework. I've got to whatever. But we also have this underlying constant long-term goal, which is for our children to feel deeply connected, to feel worthy of connection, to feel safe and secure relationally in the world, and to learn empathy and to learn ways of relating that aren't about control or instant gratification. So we have to kind of balance, hey, I need to say no to this, or I need to get you motivated to do X, Y, or Z with, I want to be modeling for you what a mature grown-up looks like. I want to be modeling for you how to handle emotions, because I'm having some emotions about the fact that you're jumping up and down and I've asked you to lay your head on your pillow. Right. So I think recognizing that sometimes the short-term goals get so right here in our face that we can forget those longer-term goals. And we want to pause and go, okay, yes, I need to get everybody to school. But also, I want my children to learn that even when things don't go my way, it's not okay for me to threaten them. It's not okay for me to have a tantrum in response to that.
Right? Tantrum,
so, yeah. So let's say we say no and our child tantrums and we give them compassion and they tantrum more because they know that empathy means I'm really not getting the thing. We're working on that long-term goal, right? We're helping them develop a mentality about the world because we're their primary model for that, right? And so when they are in their room after they've slammed their door and they're calming their bodies down, they're just now starting to process. They weren't processing when we were in that emotional moment. They're processing as they come down off of that neurochemical reaction. And we want to have been in the other room, a place that they can return to without shame, without feeling like they have to like swallow their pride. You know, I always say, hey, I know this is hard. I'd love to hug you if you want to hug after this. You know, because eventually the tantrum does come down and then I could knock on the door and say, hey, kiddo, do you want me to come in or do you need more time? Oh, you want me to come in? Okay. And then I sit next to him. I put my hand on the back. I'm like, hey, that was hard. Yeah, I know. Why won't you let me? Do you want me to tell you again why? I can tell you again why. I wonder if you just need to be sad though for a little longer because you're sad that you can't.
Hey, I would love for you to touch on a lot of times when people see this form of parenting, which I think is getting more widely acceptable and more widely known. There's so much more research, so many more people talking about it. And I think there's a huge influx of people that see the way that their parents parented and are like, I don't want to do that, but I don't really know what else there is. But then see this kind of parenting and feel like it's permissive or it's passive, or it will raise kids that are entitled because you're like, well, we have to teach them that behavior of stomping around and not getting what they want is not okay. How do you
and so this is where, I think people have a very limited idea of what teaching means. So their view of teaching in that critique is that we are only teaching if we are punishing and if we are controlling. But think about the way you learn. Think about the way all of us learn best. it isn't through punishment. When people punish us, we learn 2 lessons. They didn't like the thing we did, and we can't trust them to be gentle or relationally safe with us in situations where they don't like what we do, right?
Right.
So it's a very dangerous way to teach, actually, in terms of relationship. I can't tell you how many adults I work with in therapy who have no interest in joining their families for holidays because their experience of their parents was punitive. And it still is. Like their parents are still relating to them through control. But so when my child stomps off into the other room and I come back in and I offer comfort and I help them process their emotions, I'm teaching them about the things that were underlying that situation, which in the long run, as they mature, helps them to process that information with more maturity. So the child who experiences empathy in that moment is far more likely to be an adult who accepts and is flexible when things don't go their way than the opposite. And I'm not being permissive. My kids engage in behaviors that are problematic all the time, like all kids. Yeah. And I say, that's not okay. We're not going to use our hands that way. I'm going to need to take you into the other room for a break until you can be safe with your hands. I'm keeping limits. I'm responding. I am just not overreacting in my response. And I'm not modeling, I'm the boss, you're not, which really models the exact thing that the child is doing, right? It's a control grab. It's a power response. So, but I do think some people misinterpret this and they do end up being permissive with their children. And if their child is upset, they let their child's emotions make the decisions. So my children's emotions do not make the decisions, but they always get empathy from me. So if my child's in an emotional state, in an emotional state, they receive empathy and emotional support from me. But their emotions are not determining what I am doing and how, except with some exceptions, right? There are moments in time, every once in a while. Like my son very rarely stays home from school sick. He loves school. And last week he had a stomach ache. And he kind of had one before he got on the bus, got to school, and like an hour in, I got a phone call, like he's really sick. He came home and his stomach was really hurting. And then probably like 2 hours in, his stomach was feeling better. And in our house, I'm pretty clear on like, we go to school unless we're sick. And so I said, I think we should go back to school. And he had this meltdown. And I was like, that's interesting, because he usually loves going to school. And I had there was like a rigidity in me that wanted to be like, no, we're going to school, or you can lay in your bed and sleep. These are my standards. But I paused and was like, okay, let me listen to him. And he said, Mom, it's so embarrassing because when you have a stomach ache, people think about you like pooping or puking. And it's like, I didn't. And so then what if they think, and like, as he started processing, I thought, man, this is a really legitimate, at his stage of life, he's not quite sure how to process this level of vulnerability with his peers. And his peers are also 8 years old. So they don't know how to handle this either. And so we sort of made an agreement. And I said, listen, I actually understand that and understand that you're just wanting to wait till tomorrow. So let's make the rest of the day as a reading day. If you want to stay home and read and work on your reading skills, that sounds great. Right. So we can allow for some nuance and some listening.
And some flexibility, right? We don't
some flexibility
know exactly what's going to happen or what. And I love that you sat and listened to that, because the rigidity part of our brain wants to be like, no, we're going to stick to it. But listening and being understanding and compassionate, I think we'll know when to.
Well, and I stick to it so much that is an established pattern. Now, it would be one thing if this was like, the first day of school or the second day of school and he's in kindergarten and I'm like, oh, the stomach ache is nerves, I think. Like I knew this was some kind of a weird viral situation because I just know my son well and I know what it looks like when he's, faking it or not faking it or what the thing is. And so like he was in legit pain and So I would say permissiveness is never creating structure and never holding structure and letting the structure be whatever my child feels and wants they get. Yeah, that's a terrible form of structure. But so is rigidity. So is rigidity. You do what I say when I say it, how I say it. That is a terrible form of structure. That teaches children that life is about who has the power.
Yeah. And connection lands in the center, right? It's like I can hold these firm, compassionate boundaries of love and understanding without moving to either extreme. And like you said, I think that's what every child wants. That's what we wanted.
Yes.
So I would love to speak to the people that are listening that are like, yes, already. I love you. I do this. Yeah. but I struggle to do it because I'm still in the throes of trying to figure out my own childhood and how that's impacting my parenting now. And I know that your guidebook is great for this also, but what pieces could you pull from that book to help our listeners today who are like, yeah, I want to work on me. I understand that I need to, shift some things. What would they do?
Well, I would say work on these two primary things. Buff up the amount of people in your world that you utilize for support. So if you have 2 to 4 people in your world that you can call and say, hey, I'm having a moment. I'm feeling reactive. Can you help calm me down and help remind me about the kind of parent I want to be to my kid? Make sure that you are utilizing people in that way. We all need other adults to help us co-regulate. So whether that's a partner or a friend or parents or grandparents or aunt or a fellow coworker, whatever, but like get a collection of 2 to 4 people that you regularly utilize to help you regulate your emotions around parenting, because parenting is emotional. It is. And then I would say make a quick focus on your physical health. Mental health is physical. So if we aren't eating enough, drinking enough, moving enough, sleeping enough, it's a lot harder to stay regulated. And then it is our regulation that primarily drives our responses to our children.
Yeah.
So do what you can to take care of your body.
So that you're just more even-keeled, more able to regulate. And how would you suggest somebody dig into kind of going back and healing their childhood if they're like, okay, well, this is what's going to help me parent my kids in a new and different way. How do they even start with that?
I mean, that is what my workbook is exactly for, because it is complex. I mean, it is, I kind of help everybody look at like, what attachment pattern have you developed in relationship to your growing up? And then how did that pattern form in other relationships? What was the cultural dynamic in your life? And how did that influence how you view yourself, emotions, needs, tenderness? There's 160 prompts in my workbook. So it's like hard to summarize it because it's a lot. Because complex attachment dynamics have lots of tentacles. And we all have more than one attachment experience, whether that's we had more than one parent, or we had more than one sweetheart or best friend or teachers in our lives, right? So there's a lot of different nuances in our journey, but really looking at like, what do I do when there is tenderness? When that is my tenderness, when it's other people's tenderness, what do I do in those emotional moments? That's kind of your big reveal around, is your attachment pattern secure or not? And knowing that you're not going to do that, you're not going to do it well in every single tender moment. Like sometimes we're just tired, or our kids are just extra feral for who knows why. And it's really the pattern. What's my general pattern? Am I warm? Am I responsive? Am I emotionally attuned? Am I calm in my responses? Am I grounded in myself? That's what we want to get to.
That is so good. That is so good. And if they're going through your workbook and they feel like they need support, do you typically work with parents, or do you work with kids, or all over the place?
Well, the best resource I have is I have a membership, so people can sign up, and I have classes and monthly Q&As that I do, live Q&As. And then I have a team of coaches that will offer support. So if you're looking for, I need something very specific around my attachment or about my past and how that's affecting my parenting, go to attachmentnerd.com and you can find all of those resources, the membership and the coaching.
Hey, I love it. So last question.
Yes.
I want you to envision that your life goal is complete and you waved at this magic wand and everybody in the world is now securely attached. I want you to tell me, what are the biggest differences you see? Why is this so important?
Well, when we are securely attached, we are calmer. And when we are calmer, we make more rational decisions. I mean, I imagine a world where there is just more understanding between people. Right. And there is more of a generosity in how people relate to each other. I think there'd be a lot more women elected into office. Mothers, I'm kind of like, that's maybe the solution. A little less war, a little less mom, a little more mom. I think it's the core of what peace comes from. Connection. Peace comes from being deeply attuned to other people. So I mean, if I was laying on my deathbed and everyone was secure, I'm looking for an increase in statistics. By the time I die, realistically, I hope we're like up to 60 or 70% secure, maybe 80. That'd be a real stretch, but I'd be into it.
You know what we are at right now? Like we didn't really dive into the research at all, but 50-50. Wow. Okay.
But so, and with 8 billion people, 4 billion people have this experience of being emotionally disconnected in their childhood. And that forming and shaping their brain and their beliefs and their ways of relating. So, and I was one of those 4 billion people. I did not have a secure attachment growing up. I had to learn my patterns. So
yes,
I just really, really hope that as many people as possible can have the kind of healing that I've been privileged to have. Because man, life is so much easier on this side of the experience for sure.
Amen. Yes, it is. Especially parenting. Parenting is way, way easier. Still hard.
Yes. Always hard. Doesn't matter. You don't walk into like a Zen experience just because you have a secure pattern, but you at least have the peace of knowing that you're relating to your children in a way that will empower them in the long run.
I love that. That is a perfect quote to end on. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing about your book and all the things. We will have all of the links to everything that we talked about on this episode in the show notes. So you can go check them out. You can go get her workbook right now. It's the perfect thing to work on.
Thank you.
Doing this work. So thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to help spread this work to the world, share this episode on social media and tag me. Send it to a friend or leave a quick rating and review below so more people can find me. If you'd like more guidance on your own parenting journey, reach out.